Imagine a game analyzes your weaknesses and your playstyle and then promotes a microtransaction that would help you win your next match. Or maybe a game analyzes your customization preferences, your aesthetic preferences, what you like to put on your character or your player, and they create custom vanity items for you to purchase based on your own behavior, based on the things that you've been doing. Well, I actually think monetization in gaming will likely evolve and grow to a point where this is possible. And I want to continue our series, AI in Gaming, and talk about monetization, because I do believe machine learning and AI technology that's being harnessed right now within game development will evolve and touch virtually every aspect of gaming. And a significant part of gaming is monetization, if we're, honest. And the question will be, will this make it better or will it make it worse? Many people look at monetization and think it's just terrible. A lot of the conversations surrounding microtransactions or the monetization practices of game devs, it's usually pretty negative. People have very strong opinions. Some think that all monetization is bad, virtually all of it is bad, or that full price games should never feature any level of any kind of monetization, any kind of additive content or sales, or even like a vanity store where you can just buy customization items. Many sort of throw around words like predatory and scummy, and the fact of the matter is, I don't think that's an accurate or helpful way to have the conversation. I don't think monetization is going to go anywhere anytime soon. And I think it's just going to likely increase the number of avenues and areas of gaming that are touched by it. And one of the things that I've always pushed for is, let's get down into the specifics. Let's talk about the actual practices and be specific, because I do think we can accurately pinpoint bad or unethical practices, but that doesn't mean that every part of monetization is bad. That doesn't mean it's not helping certain game types and certain games of certain genres do quite well, and it enables them to do more with their game. I think when we point out with precision where a game is being predatory or posturing or fostering a sort of true pay-to-win culture, or anything that sort of makes people feel like they have to spend money just to partake, that I think is helpful to point out. And with AI and machine learning technology, game devs and publishers will no doubt try to harness it and put in better or improved microtransactions into their game. Now, I would like to break this video down into two parts, into two sections: the way that it could make things worse and the way that it could make things better. I do think, honestly, the greater risk here would be they would use your behavior against you, right? That's one of the primary concerns about machine learning technology in general, with advertisements, with things being sort of driven on platforms according to data and everything that you're doing. I do think you're going to see more platforms, social media, even YouTube will use what you do to garner more views, to garner more money, and video games will not be immune to this sort of thing. So keep in mind, a lot of these ideas and speculations that I'm making in this series, AI in Gaming, they're probably 10 years out, 20 years out. I'm casting a very long view here, thinking through how this will evolve and how it will fundamentally change the way that we engage with games. So first, let's just talk about making things worse. The most common video game genre for microtransactions and monetization that sort of overreaches or gets into a bad place is sports games. You can see this very clearly in the criticism as well as the pushback that the gaming community has tried to put in place against how sport games utilize card packs, stronger players, better teams, etc. And this is where I think things could really go south. Machine learning and AI programs could easily measure your skill and your efficiency in a game and adapt to make it harder for you to win. I mean, you can already kind of see this put in place with skill-based matchmaking in games, where as soon as you play well, you start getting put into games that seemingly are impossible to win. It's like the pendulum swings all the way in the other direction, and that's very unsophisticated, right? Skill-based matchmaking in games like Call of Duty, and even in some of the sports games, it's not very sophisticated. It's very fast. You have one or two decent games, and then all of a sudden, you're playing against people that are well out of your league. I think that the more sophisticated and the more precise machine learning and player behavior can be measured and recorded, you could start to see this heavily implemented in sports games. So you could see them sort of adapt on the fly, and then difficulty could be then paired with monetization. They would know just what you need to win the next game. They would be able to capitalize on the things where, well, this is the weakest part of their strategy or the weakest part of their team, and they could put you against AI, like actual fake players that do this, or they could know if they're measuring your gameplay strength and weaknesses, they would know somebody else's, and they could have just the right player and just the right position to make all the difference in the world. If you use this with the forms of skill-based matchmaking that are already out there, they could consistently match you against players who are bigger spenders, and then they would subsequently capitalize on your weaknesses. If you are weak against a certain defense or offense and they have the right players, they have the right teams, and they've spent money, they're going to put you into those matches, and then you would be more likely to spend. At least you would feel like you need to. There was already studies and patents filed for this. They wanted to matchmake you against people who had spent money so you could see things that you didn't have, and you would feel that sense of FOMO. FOMO is fear of missing out, and then you would sense, oh, I need to buy those things. Well, if your storefront, if your sort of microtransaction shop could offer you custom things that are set up for you to buy because they know you need them, they fostered an environment where you're going to want them more, that would increase monetization. It would increase customer spending. In other words, machine learning and AI technology could analyze your gameplay and create a profile for you, and then they could set you on a trajectory of loss or create a failure pattern, and they could obviously have it designed with the breaking point in mind. They would know when you would be more likely to quit. Just how many times can you lose before you're going to spend money or uninstall the game and walk away? Well, they would know that. They'd be analyzing player behavior. You're not the only person they'd be recording data on, so they would have data sets and trends and projections of when they knew a player would disengage, and they could use this against you, knowing that just enough losses combined with just enough wins will keep you coming back. But if they keep pressing in on those weaknesses, on those player vacancies, you might be more likely to go spend money. Many would be quick to call this predatory. They would say that this is unethical, and you would probably be right. In a similar way to forcing companies to have transparency about the odds of rare items in a loot box or a card pack, we would have to push for similar levels of transparency for machine learning and AI. Are there programs, are there AI pieces of software or machine learning pieces of tech in the background that's analyzing what I'm doing and storing that in order to work in conjunction with a vanity store or a storefront selling card packs or players? Just how much of my behavior is being recorded, stored, and then subsequently used to alter the game or alter the storefront? If adaptive systems are put into place and my micro store and your micro store are totally custom, I think we have a right to know that. I think that level of transparency would be needed. We would also need to know to what degree our own skill and behavior is influencing this store that we're imagining in this example. If I'm having an impact on that, I think I have a right to know that I'm not looking at something that everybody else is looking at. I'm looking at something that's been custom and handcrafted for me. This is probably, I think, the best example of how machine learning and AI could go in a bad direction. You could take this as a test case and you could apply it to virtually any game where power or advantage is sold. So, big picture, how could AI and machine learning make monetization worse? Basically, they could use your own data and behavior against you to motivate more spending. But that doesn't mean that the machine learning and AI would make all monetization worse in every scenario. There are ways that it could make it better. And I know many people are going to think, Really? You're going to make part of your video about how to make monetization better? It's always scummy. Are you kidding me? This is terrible. I don't deal in broad platitudes. I'd rather analyze ways monetization actually helps games and offers players ways to add to their experience. Not every game is made and then abandoned a couple months later. Some games are ongoing, and one of the reasons that they're enjoyed in an ongoing way is that we play games in a more hobbyist way. And if there was good monetization set up where player satisfaction was in a good place and you felt good about what you were spending your money on, and the developers were able to create things in conjunction with player feedback and behavior, that would be a pretty happy marriage. So there's 3 ways that I think monetization could improve with the help of machine learning, with the help of AI. Number 1, additive content. Number 2, vanity items. Number 3, future games. So let me just talk about additive content. One of the leading causes for criticism with ongoing games and live service content is that gamers feel that the devs don't listen. Oftentimes, this is because the content is in development long before player feedback and response from the community has even taken place. Many feel like live service games can get stuck in this sort of pendulum swing of, well, the community said this, let's make those changes. And then by the time the additive content arrives, those changes are not what anybody wants. The entire game and the hive mind of the player has shifted. It's morphed into something else. In other words, think of it like this. If the first season of a game, players think X, and they think X really strongly, and they comment and they leave remarks, and then the developers say, okay, we're going to make content and we're going to make changes based on X, but they can't implement it right away. It's going to take time, right? And sometimes maybe a year later, they're able to do some big expansion or some big piece of content that implements X. And by the time that happens, the game has been updated. Things have happened. Other seasons have come out. More pieces of content have been added to the game. Maybe even another game has come out with ideas that seem like, hey, that'd be really good for our game. And more content is also already scheduled typically. Now the community doesn't think X anymore. They think B. They're like, we're really strongly thinking that B is what we feel about this content in the game. And then they're confused as to why you're adding X. Well, they don't really remember that a year ago they felt that very strongly. It was a different game back then. The game has went through metamorphosis. It's evolved. It's changed. So imagine a game with more sophistication, with more precise and fast machine learning and AI working in conjunction, even with the procedural generation technology that continues to improve. And after just one season of play, all those millions of hours have been logged and recorded, and they know exactly the type of content that needs to be made, and maybe they can even make it faster. AI is coming up with ways to assist with procedural generation in reactive and adaptive environments, able to spin up entire worlds, which will subsequently be probably turned into ways to spin up entire pieces of content and quests and NPCs and voice lines. A lot of this is included in my AI in Gaming series, so be sure to check out those other videos about just what this will do to voice acting or NPC design or quest design. Well, if that stuff can get automated and spun up very quickly, it could be sitting there waiting for all this input. It can't do it on its own. It needs input, and that input could come from the AI systems and the machine learning over here that says, here's how players played, here's what players thought based on all of the things they did in the game. The devs would have a mountain of input that's honestly more helpful than reading forums or Reddit or Twitter. Not that they would ignore those avenues of feedback entirely, but I've always said you have to parse player feedback through the sifting bowl of player behavior. This is bad is very often driven by, I like this activity, but this one thing is making me hate it. So the devs just hear this activity is bad, scrap it. They hear that something is bad, and instead of hearing it actually within the context of enjoyment, I enjoy this piece of content, but this thing makes it bad, all they hear is, this is bad. If you look at the player behavior and machine learning and AI, they could help protect against this. They would know that, well, everybody's saying this thing is bad, but look at the numbers. Everybody's engaging with it. Where's the rub? Where's the disengagement? Where's everybody stopping, right? They could even deduce where those rough edges are. Are people getting stuck? Are they quitting? Are they having lower efficiency during certain sections? Is it making the player get confused? And I think that would do a very helpful amount of content creation adaptation, as opposed to what happens now, which the turnaround time is too slow, and everybody's really confused as to why you made this change, even though it is based on player feedback, but player feedback kind of has an expiration date on it. The second thing that I think could be improved, so that's additive content. Additive content could be more precise, more accurate, and subsequently sell better, and people would feel better about spending their money because the content would feel more crafted to what the players have been asking for. The second thing you could see affected by this in a good way is vanity items. And I know people are going to be like, are you kidding me? This is probably where I'm going to irritate people, because I am going to push for things in this section that I think many automatically reject, but hear me out. First, I think the technology being used to sort of randomly generate avatars and cosmetics is being wasted on garbage NFTs. I do not support NFTs being put into games. I think it's going to lead to extreme problems, and the technology is being wasted, in my estimation. Companies should be using that technology to create unique, one-of-a-kind cosmetics, and this could be coupled with AI-driven cosmetics based on the player's learned preferences. Your own personal storefront could be built and refined over time. Why bother showing me cutesy yellow and pink stuff if I don't like cutesy and yellow and pink stuff, but the person next to me does? Well, you don't want to show us all the same stuff because we're not interested in a lot of it, right? For companies, I'm sure there's records of people who visit a vanity store a handful of times and then they never go back. Maybe there's a lack of interest. They're like, I don't really care about that. Maybe the price drives them away, but when most of the items might not interest them, I've had that experience recently. I go to Fall Guys, I scroll down through and I'm like, all this stuff's ugly, and that leads to me going there less often because it's like there's just not anything in there for me. If machine learning gathered customization trends within a user's profile, the store could be handcrafted for them. You could couple this with that technology of randomly generating cosmetics, so anything I buy is uniquely mine, which increases the value of it, so I'm not going to look like the person next to me who also happens to like red and black. It's going to be my own personal item, and it was created based off of what I do and what I choose to wear in the game. This could help both the developer and the consumer. You would have more things within your own aesthetic preference to choose from, and the companies would likely make more money. But this will drive companies to put more vanity items in the store instead of the game. Maybe, but it would also incentivize game companies to put enough customization in the game to learn your preferences. They can't learn your preferences without a wide array of options, and given the variety of gamers in the world and all the potential customizations out there, you would potentially get far more customization options in the game, because it would make the machine learning in the AI-driven vanity store more effective and accurate, because you have more to choose from. They wouldn't want to limit your options, they'd want to increase your options, because then they would use that information to sell more customization stuff. Lastly, future games. How will monetization shift around future games with machine learning and AI? Anytime a game company or a sequel is being worked on, they have to consider all of the areas of improvement. If the entirety of a game's gameplay is recorded, if it's organized, if it's learned from, then future titles could be created based on all that information. How many of the casual players out there never set foot on the forums? They never go to Reddit, they never go to Twitter, and yet their game trends and their player patterns are vitally important. Maybe even more important, because they're probably more likely to spend money and to play the game in a more casual way. They might not be a whale, but they're very engaged. Game devs should be thinking about machine learning and AI systems for virtually every part of the game. What weapons were getting the most use? What abilities were ignored? What gameplay loops got the most and the least attention? Where did engagement slope up? Where did it slope down? Borderlands 1 had a small amount of info regarding this, surrounding this idea, and it really helped them with Borderlands 2. I couldn't find the interview, but I know there was an interview where they basically said there was a point of the game where lots of people dropped off. There was like this early game hump, and a lot of people didn't get over that hump because you didn't know what was going on. It was very hard game in the early stages, and then it slowly got more fun and more enjoyable. Well, they conversely noticed that if people got over that hump, they would spend a ton more time in the game. Like just a huge upswing of player engagement hours went up if they could just get over that first initial hump. With a higher degree of specificity and accuracy, you could get this level analysis down into every aspect of the game. The weapons people use, the abilities, the skill trees, the content loop, the quest types, all of that information could be vastly helpful to crafting your next game, and then you could promote it as that. Like, we've done all these things. We've listened to the players. This could lead to a faster level of symbiosis between player and developer, which I think leads to more money spent and more satisfied customers. So I do think there are a lot of ways that monetization could benefit from machine learning and AI, but there's also risks and bad things that could come from it as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Check out all my other videos in this series, AI in Gaming. It's here, and it's not going away, and it certainly is going to change everything we do in the gaming industry.